Hello all, this is the Owl, and yep, it's about time. At long last, we get to start in on Volume 5 of Made in Abyss, the final volume of the first true arc. Volume 5 of Made in Abyss is probably the volume that made the series such a sleeper hit in dark manga quarters. Not only is it really good, but this is where Made in Abyss comes together, tonally speaking. By which I naturally mean that, yeah, this is the darkest part of the series, at least up until this point. Oh, don't you worry. It does top itself later on with Volume 8. We'll get there when we get there. And holy crap to those of you who aren't in the know, well, firstly, why are you watching these videos and not reading the manga? And secondly, you'll see. Oh boy, you'll see. But I know that when I read Volume 5 for the first time, I was not ready for it. The various pitch black revelations, which will be revealed soon, are just damn. Certain panels are just etched into my memory, in both a good and a bad way. Because Volume 5 is also really frigging good. The culmination of the first major arc, and while I do think that the second arc is stronger, it's also bonkers and hard to follow at times, while this one is just midnight dark perfection. What do I mean? Well, let's dive right back on in. Volume 5 opens somewhat back in the past, showing us a bit more of Riko and Prushka and how they've truly established a strong friendship, with the older girl gently teasing Riko and also firing a stinky mania at her, okay? And yes, it's all very cute and wholesome. Riko explains that she doesn't just want to find her mother, she wants to continue adventuring in the abyss with Nanachi and Reg forever because Riko is clinically insane. Yes, I know that for some reason, people are obsessed with the abyss, but after a certain point, you've only got yourself to blame. We also learn a little bit about Prushka's background. Oh, don't you worry, we will get the whole shebang soonish, and it's a lot. But it turns out that my suspicions were correct, and her hair is indeed odd, due to her falling victim to the 5th layer curse. As the interlude continues, we see that the irrepressible young girl, despite loving her mad scientist father deeply, had decided that she wanted to strike out on her own, to join the party and go adventuring with her new friends, to find the bottom of the abyss together. Before Riko wakes up in the present, screaming. Yeah, that sucks. The party are all gradually recovering from their ass-kicking at the hands of Bondrewd. Riko is still sick from the after effects of his darts, Reg is pretty banged up, and Nanachi is naturally quite badly traumatized. Reg cannot really even pass out what happened to them. He was able to hold his own against Bondrewd for a time, but when he moved to the more combat-ready body with the tail, which, out of interest, apparently that's a relic known as Third Works, keep that information in mind for later, because there's something that really confuses me about said relic. He was able to completely overwhelm Reg and the others without any real difficulty. Rico begins to catalogue the various relics that might help to explain just what the hell they observed, and tries to understand how Bondrewd was able to, from her perspective, swap heads and thus bodies. Only Nanachi points out that the head itself is still there, gently liquefying into a pile of goo and teeth. That's nasty. The only thing the new body took was his iconic mask. This twigs Rico onto what's going on. Apparently, Bondrewd has been making use of a long-lost and absurdly powerful relic that allows for the transference of consciousness between multiple bodies. Zoaholic, the soul slave machine, allowing him to attain pseudo-immortality by having physical backups he can switch to at will. And yes, I know I got this wrong in my first attempt at this, but the reason the other Umbra Hand grabbed the mask? Well, it's implied that this is Bondrewd's face to Prushka. That's all. Which, okay, but I've always liked the idea of a head-swapping baddie. It's just so wonderfully macabre. Regardless, now feeling a bit more bucked up, as opposed to a word with one letter difference, the party dust themselves off and begin talking about what to do next. After some more discussion, they begin to have the inklings of a plan to rescue their new friend. Zoaholic is big, bulky, and immobile, so it must be kept somewhere within the reaches of Idorfront. If they were able to infiltrate the fortress, find this pivotal relic as the secret behind Bondrewd's power, and succeed in destroying it, that would distract the mad scientist long enough for them to find their friend and escape. But that would likely involve a direct confrontation with him at some point. After all, every Umbra Hand in the fortress is, in a sense, Bondrewd. Thus, in order to stand a chance if they were to challenge the powerful White Whistle again, they realize that they will need to find a way to recharge Reg. Rico reveals that he is essentially a bottomless pit for electricity. When she woke him up using the electric chair in Orth, it drained the entire city. He thus dives deep into the ocean beneath Idorfront, where the hydroelectric generator is located, with Nanachi and Rico returning to the fortress to create a distraction and buy him some time. In the bowels of the fortress, Reg encounters... Nope, I have absolutely no idea what's going on with this weirdness. A malformed man with a papier-mâché black whistle, who looks like he might be missing a portion of his head, along with others doing menial tasks down here. And no, this never comes up again, and I don't think I have ever seen any more information on it, so yeah. What the hell? Bondrewd has an army of zombie workers? Nope, no idea. Regardless, surrounded by all manner of weird, disturbing Dr. Frankenstein crap, Reg begins to freak out a little bit, but he does pull himself together, remembering that he is doing this for Prushka's sake. Good luck, mate. You're going to need it. Meanwhile, Nanachi and Rico are recaptured and are being led along by another Umbra Hand when everything starts sparking and crackling, and then the power cuts out. And here we go. this next bit, how on earth do I even do it justice? Well, let's try, because this is where the manga starts to kick off. Deep within the generator room, we see an enormous electrical burn, and as the smoke clears, something stands up from the charred center. It's Reg, and he looks like he's auditioning to join the gorillas. Seriously, there's something about this that's just haunting. Nanachi and Riko have, however, managed to slip away in the darkness. And once their escort wanders off looking for them, Riko switches on the headlamp and the entire fortress begins shaking. This must be Reg doing something. They prepare to use this distraction to go off and find Prushka when something grabs Riko from behind. But it's just Mania, and the weird little Digimon creature dashes off, seemingly beckoning them to follow. After making their way through the labyrinthine fortress, they find a large, ominous-looking door, behind which a very unpleasant little room full of bizarre, wicked-looking instruments, hooks, gurneys, scalpels, and other implements, and oh, that's not good at all. What the hell is going on in here? And yup, here we go, as Nanachi begins to explain what Bondrewd meant by his research on how to come and go from Layer 6, having progressed somewhat. Boys and girls, it's time we learned about cartridges, aka the most messed up thing in the manga before, yes, people who've read Volume 8 get it. So, cartridges, Bondrewd's new trick to move back up from Layer 6 without getting mittied by the curse. Remember those orphans and street children that he collects and brings down to Layer 5 with him? Much like what Nanachi and Mitty went through? Well, no longer do they just get an elevator ride. Instead, and yes, content warning here, the kids are flayed and vivisected before being put through a bizarre surgery. Their bones, skin, and most of their organs are removed to make them as small as possible, but they are still kept alive somehow, then crammed into a metallic casing to hold them together and ensure they don't just die. Bondrewd then integrates these into his suit, and hey presto, you've got a portable curse absorber. Still alive, still conscious, suffering all the while. Bloody hell! That is one of the most depraved things I have ever heard about, and to be frank, sort of confirms my suspicion about Bondrewd being in many respects a nod to some of the stuff that Japan got up to during World War II, particularly the infamous Unit 731. Google it if you're interested, but just be warned. And from here, it just gets so much worse. Nanachi reveals that she, out of fear, assisted Bondrewd not only in developing these things, but also processing the children to make them. Yup, remember all that anatomical knowledge that she put to use helping Riko? Well, it didn't just come from experimenting on cave raiders. And that is, oh man, that's dark. As a guilt-stricken Nanachi begins having a full-on nervous breakdown, suddenly, with a boom, the doors are flung open and Bondrewd, the real Bondrewd as so far as that word holds any meaning, for this body-hopping sociopath, greets them warmly and tells Nanachi that it's good to have her back. Despite her terror, she confronts him and accuses him of wanting to turn his own daughter into a cartridge, a possibility that a horrified Riko hadn't even considered until now. But he reassures them that Prushka is just sleeping at present, and once she's awake, he'd be happy to release her to them. However, he reveals that he hadn't even considered that this was a rescue mission. He thought that they'd returned to Edo Front to build Riko's white whistle. And, surprise, surprise, we learn that these are crafted from a living human sacrifice. Because of course they are. Seriously, what is it in anime and manga with the big MacGuffin thing always requiring a human sacrifice? Oh, Japan. Except, as he explains, there's a bit more to it. See, it's not enough to just grab a random person and sacrifice them to make them into a whistle. For the whistle to be of any use, said person must sacrifice themselves willingly for the wielder. And yes, this is why a white whistle becomes inert unless wielded by the original user. This next bit is also really interesting, but we'll get into why that is somewhat later. He does tell Riko, however, that there are two ways down below, past the boundary altar. Either have a white whistle of your own, or become a white whistle for someone else. And this gives Riko a bizarre epiphany. Bondrud's own hands clasped together whistle is in fact forged from his own original body. He became his own sacrifice. And yeah, that's pretty damn metal. Bondrud, and yeah, again, this is the interesting part of this meeting, but we'll talk more about that later because it really is a nifty little bit of characterization for both of them, compliments Riko, and also indicates that he senses a lot of similarities between them. Which, She, however, does make a very pertinent point. If Bondrud can change bodies at will, why is he doing this? Can't he just use those bodies to make the cartridges rather than doing this horrible orphan shuffle? He explains with, honestly, it appears a bit of regret that even if he wanted to do it like that, it just would not be possible. After he sacrificed his body, any form he inhabits is counted as dead, so far as the abyss is concerned, and thus none of the Umbra hands can be used as a curse absorber. There's actually a bit more to it than that, but it's sort of weird and we'll learn about that later on. Only, it turns out that this might have all been the plan, and they managed to get him monologuing, as, with an immense crash, something appears, driving an Umbra hand clear through the fortress wall. As the dust clears, we see a strange, almost tentacled shape. And yup, Reg has arrived. Only no, not exactly. He is something entirely different now. And this, right here, is where the volume goes insane. Meet what's come to be known as Dark Reg. And no, as far as I know, we've never found out what exactly this transformation is, or even why it happens, as of where the manga is at the time of this recording. But everyone, Bondrewd included, is pretty surprised. Reg took out 3 of the Umbra hands Bondrewd sent after him with apparent ease. No mean feat, considering that these are Black Whistle level cave raiders. Nanachi calls out a warning to Reg, but he doesn't seem to be paying anything any heed. Instead, he fires himself past her like a howitzer shell, yelling his defiance, hemorrhaging black electricity, and his remaining cabled limb whirling around him. Bondrewd fires off several shaker darts, but the seemingly berserk Reg, now a thing of lightning and pain, easily deflects them as he bears down on the madman. Yes, this is another anime and manga trope that I adore. You know, the moment where the hero goes completely moggy and loses all control, and is thus able to fight the big bad one-on-one. Kick ass. Riko tells Nanachi to handle things here and rushes off to rescue Prushka while Reg engages Bondrewd, who seems both genuinely impressed and excited to fight an Albard. Oh, and this is also pretty nifty. Usually, Bondrewd is drawn with a sketchy style, while everyone else has more standard lines, giving him an unearthly feel. But now, after his transformation, Reg is the one who looks sketchy, while Bondrewd seems solid, almost as if Reg is now something so otherworldly that he makes the arch-villain look normal by comparison. While I do have certain issues with some of Tsukushi's content at times, holy crap, does the man understand visual storytelling. I'm almost sad that we will never get to see what his Made in Abyss pop-up book would have looked like, but I'll bet it would have been quite something. Anyway, the two clash. Third works meeting whirling cables and black energy, but initially Bondrewd seems to have the upper hand, batting Reg around as if he was weightless, and then follows it up with another relic, a shattering prismatic beam fired from his helmet. Gangway. Damn it, does that look awesome. But Reg's cable is moving so fast that he is able to deflect it and kicks off a wall, flying in to counterattack. Bondrewd responds with a Sparagmos blast, piercing clean through him. Only, no, Reg twisted aside at the last second, and the beam drilled through his cloak as he smacks past Bondrewd, ripping off a piece of his helmet with his teeth. Yes, as I said, this sequence rules. Under the torn metal, we actually get a look at what Bondrewd's face looks like, including a bizarre-looking relic in place of his eye that actually reminds me a bit of the Rinnegan from Naruto. And no, according to Tsukushi, this weird relic is not how he's able to spy on Nanachi's vision, and we don't know how he does that or what this relic does. My guess is that we never will. Oh right, as always, we get some really fun stuff in between chapters, and in this volume, these take the form of nifty little explanations of how Bondrewd's suit and his various weaponized relics function. But yeah, this is the bit that I was going to mention. See, while I'm not going to talk too much about the third arc, as it's still ongoing and I honestly have no idea where the story is headed in that regard, one thing that I do enjoy about this story is, well, without too many spoilers, both of the primary villains in the completed arcs thus far, namely Bondrewd and Wazukyan, oh don't worry, we will get to Captain Cucumber before too long, have a certain resonance with Riko, albeit in different domains. Again, we'll go more into Wazukian when we reach his part of the story, but in Bondrewd's case, both him and Riko are utterly obsessed with the abyss and getting down deeper, learning the secrets of the bottom of the great pit. They're both also gigantic relic nerds. Remember Riko attempting to essentially put relics together to make her own, which she then names. And yeah, this was actually explained a bit more in the game, and Bondrewd building himself a sick-ass suit, while Riko would likely never consider doing all the horrific stuff Bondrewd has to get down lower. The implication is that, well, it's not impossible, or at least it's likely not quite that clear-cut. What would she do if, say, she found herself faced with an insurmountable obstacle to her descending any further? What would she be willing to sacrifice? It's something that I've always loved from a narrative perspective. The protagonist seeing elements of themselves in the villain. For instance, yes, anyone who's been on one of our streams will know that I am a huge Batman nerd, and seeing Scarecrow reflecting his use of psychology and fear, Two-Face representing his dual identity, and Bane reflecting his raw physicality combined with intelligence, that's just really strong storytelling and world building. Of course, in this case, it's so significant that I have joked more than once that Bondrewd is going to turn out to be an alternate future version of Riko or something, because that would both be amazing and completely insane. And you know what? It's still not entirely impossible. I can't prove that I'm right, but you can't prove that I'm wrong. Anyway. Reg and Bondrewd face off against each other, apparently evenly matched. This time, it's Reg who attacks first, kicking off with enough force to destroy the floor underneath him and launching himself towards the madman. Bondrewd blocks him using third works, but this time, in another really great series of panels. Seriously, while the battles in Maiden Abyss are a bit thin on the ground, Tsukushi knows how to work them out, and Reg lands such a solid strike that it rips right through the tail-like relic, actually managing to catch Bondrewd off guard, destroying his extra limb and causing him to resort to another new weapon, Far Caress, a net-like black goo that binds Reg to the floor. If I'm not mistaken, Far Caress is actually a living creature, and that only raises further questions. Meanwhile, searching for Prushka, Riko stumbles onto Zoaholic, being operated by a strange four-armed Umbra hand. We cut back to the battle. Reg cannot break free of Far Caress, but Nanachi notices him for once being both smart and decisive. Perhaps too decisive, as he's beginning to charge the incinerator, and she realizes that Reg is going to fire an absolutely cataclysmic blast powered by his new form. She tells Riko to run like hell in the opposite direction as she gallops over to Reg and leaps on top. Don't overthink that last sentence, telling him not to go through with it, as he will almost certainly kill Riko. And okay, what happens next is complicated, but let me see if I can't parse it out. Nanachi is too late. Everything turns white, streaked with pitch black lightning. Everything distorts as a colossal explosion damn it, but that looks sweet, spreads out. And when she opens her eyes, she's flying through the air. Or, no, she's falling into a deep new pit opened into the landscape where part of the fortress was. Reg catches her and drags her to an outcrop, and from there they survey the utter devastation below. Nice work, Reg. Now this, from my understanding, was not well explained in the manga or the anime, but if I'm not mistaken, according to Tsukushi, Reg can, in this case subconsciously, exclude biological targets from his attack, which is why it didn't evaporate Nanachi or Riko. It was in a Q&A interview, if I'm not mistaken, but I cannot for the life of me find it again. Regardless, that was one hell of a battle. In the aftermath, and oh yeah, I forgot about this stuff, Reg tells Nanachi that when he entered dark mode, it felt like a bunch of other people were inside him, and one of them took control. I think that's supposed to be Liza, but I'm not sure who the other one is supposed to be. But yeah, this is all pretty weird. My guess is by the time we get there, this will have been explained in the manga. We do get another pretty fun moment, as Nanachi wonders what it was that she said, which snapped Reg out of it. But it turns out that somehow feeling Nanachi's, fluffiness not only snapped Reg out of it, but it also apparently gave him the happy pants. No, I'm not gonna show that, you weirdos. But she clouts him one. Still, looking down at the damaged fortress and the absolutely enormous pit blasted, I am assuming, into layer 6, thanks to Reg's enormous blast, they wonder what happened to Bondrewd. Did he get nuked? Is this the end of the battle? As if to answer, suddenly, the large four-armed Umbra hand we saw earlier smashes through the wall, speaks in Bondrewd's voice, grabs Reg, and in one of my favorite panels in the manga, the pair tumble down into the pit together. And that brings us to the halfway point of Volume 5, and where we will end this video for today. Before we finish, I want to give a huge thanks, as always, to my fantastic patrons: Jake Reagan, Piece of Yeast, Elspresso, Question Man 6, Cheerful Satanist, Starwin Marwin, Kel Core, Jacob Ramsey, Crazy, James Bakes Bread, Wargle, Opinion Custard, Lance Goebel, Paul Norberger, Rafferty, Aaron Arnold, The Hedgehog Gamer, Simone, XTC Pill, B Empress, Jake, and Cheshire Quill. If you want to see more like this, why not stick around? Subscribe, bell, you know the drill. If you want to hear me say your name, get early access to most of my videos, have some fun perks on the Discord, and, you know, help us out and buy Baby Owl the necessaries and ensure that I can keep on doing what I do into 2024, why not take a look at our Patreon? If you want to chit-chat about, well, basically anything, drop by our Twitch. We generally stream on Sunday afternoons, and we'll be back to doing Friday streams too, hopefully in September. Or naturally drop by our Discord. There's a wonderful little community over there. Take care, my friends, and cheers. This is the Owl, signing off.